Have you ever prayed with all your heart, waited in silence, and wondered if God was still listening? You speak, you hope, you believe. But nothing seems to change. The answers don't come. The doors don't open. And in the quiet, doubt begins to whisper. If that feels familiar, then you may find comfort in the story of David's wilderness years. David's journey didn't begin with struggle. It began with a promise. He was a young shepherd when the prophet Samuel anointed him to be king. Oil was poured over his head and God's favor rested on him. In that moment, David's future felt clear. He would one day lead Israel. But what followed the anointing was not a throne. It was years of waiting. David returned to ordinary life, tending sheep, serving in Saul's court, fighting battles. For a time, it seemed like things were moving forward, and then everything changed. King Saul grew jealous, afraid of David. The same man David had served faithfully now wanted him dead. David was forced to run. He fled into the wilderness, hiding in caves, sleeping in unfamiliar places, constantly looking over his shoulder. The future God had promised felt farther away than ever. Instead of wearing a crown, David lived like a fugitive. Imagine the confusion. David had done nothing wrong. He had obeyed God. He had been anointed for greatness, yet his life was marked by fear, loneliness, and uncertainty. There were moments when David must have wondered if he had misunderstood God, if the promise was real. Why did the path look like this? During those long years in the wilderness, God often felt silent. David cried out in prayers that seemed unanswered. He wrote psalms filled with fear, sorrow, and longing. He asked God why he seemed distant. He questioned how long the waiting would last. And still, David waited. Even when David had the chance to take matters into his own hands, he refused. Twice he had the opportunity to kill Saul and end his suffering. But David chose patience over power. He trusted that God's timing was better than his own. David understood something deep and difficult. If God had promised it, God would fulfill it, but it would happen in God's time, not his. The wilderness was not wasted. It was shaping David into the kind of king he needed to become. In the caves, David learned humility. In isolation, he learned to depend on God alone. In danger, he learned restraint, mercy, and faith. The silence was doing something in him. Eventually, the waiting ended. Saul's reign came to an end, and David was crowned king, just as God had promised. The years of fear and hiding were not forgotten, but they had prepared David to lead with wisdom, compassion, and deep trust in God. David's story teaches us this. Silence does not mean abandonment. There are seasons when God speaks loudly and seasons when he works quietly. When prayers feel unanswered, God may still be shaping your heart. When the path feels unclear, God may still be guiding your steps. When progress feels slow, God may still be preparing you for what comes next. Waiting is not a sign of failure. Silence is not a sign of rejection. Just as David's anointing did not immediately lead to the throne, your calling may not immediately lead to fulfillment, but the promise still stands. If you are in a season where God feels distant, take heart. The same God who watched over David in the wilderness is watching over you now. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. And the silence you are experiencing may be part of the preparation, not the end of the story. Trust that God is still present, even when you cannot hear him. And remember, the wilderness is not your final destination.